So the phone activity between the surviving roommates, Bethany and Dylan, has finally come out, and it's very sketchy to say the least. Let's go through it and see what I've flagged as suspicious. I'll put the link to the documents in the description as well as my Idaho 4 playlist. So starting at 2:10 a.m., we have Dylan texting the Uber driver, which some people think is named Eric Gower. She asks him if he is driving, which he replies that he is. Why would Dylan need to text the Uber driver? Wasn't she supposed to be at home and really drunk at that point? There's a theory I've heard that maybe Bethany and Dylan were not even at home, or at least not for the whole night. I think it could actually make sense. Next at 2:53, we have Maddie calling Bethany, which is very interesting cause if we look back at the interview that Kaylee's mom and sister did about the late night calls they made to Kaylee's ex-boyfriend Jack, they said all the calls ended 1 minute earlier than this. At 2:52.
From those phone records, it looks like the girls may have been alive around 2:30ish.
2:30 is what, the last call?
No. The last call is shortly before 3 a.m.
Yeah, that's right, 2:50 something.
2:52. For both of them.
Yeah.
So was the 2:53 call really the final one? At 3:51, we have Dylan adding a new contact into her phone. Did she just find a random sticky note from earlier that night and just now remembered to add the new person into her phone? Or does this support the theory again that Dylan wasn't even home at this time and was out somewhere else when adding the new contact? At 4:19 we have Bethany calling Dylan, which starts the first of their communication for the night. Clearly they were not together at this point, whether at home or out somewhere. At 4:23, we have Bethany and Dylan texting each other saying things that seem to be out of context, considering that we see no above texts that would lead to saying things like, Xana was wearing all black, and, no, it's like ski mask almost, and, like he had something over his forehead and mouth. Did they delete other texts before that, or again, were they not home and these texts are part of a setup? Now the 4:24 text from Dylan to Bethany saying her phone is going to die is confusing. Especially since the next 3 texts are Bethany telling Dylan to come downstairs to her room where you would think Bethany would have a phone charger, or was she not home to be able to get to a phone cord at the time? I really want to know if y'all think they were home all night or not. All I can find is a couple of photos of what looks to maybe be Dylan outside of the house in the morning, but she could have come back home by then. I still always think about this post that was posted to what I believe is the University of Idaho's Facebook page, and apparently taken down soon after. It was posted a week and a half after November 23, 2022, by a photography group from the university. It says, I just found out, my remote photography group has video from a tripod that was stationed behind the house. It recorded from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. and shows a woman running from the side of the house as a truck entered the driveway. She ran away from the house and right by our tripod at approximately 2 a.m. A group member removed the tripod and I don't know who has the video. It is the group's right to not disclose why we record, but we would send in recordings in special circumstances. So what do you think of that? If that's true, that's pretty crazy. I wonder if it was Dylan or Bethany running from the house. On another version of the text documents, at 4:24 a.m., Dylan texts Bethany saying I'm scared though, and at 4:25, Bethany replies saying, yeah, I know, but it's better than being alone. And then 4:27, Dylan makes a call to somebody we also can't see. At 4:32, Dylan texts Kaylee saying, please answer. As we've seen so far, there's been quite a bit of social media activity from Bethany and Dylan during the early morning hours, but from now until noon, there's quite a bit more. At 8 a.m., Bethany makes another unknown call, and also tries to call her parents. Her dad calls her back at 8:09 and her mom texts her back at 9:04. I wonder what they were talking about. Now recapping. At 4:24, Dylan said her phone was going to die. It looks like Dylan's phone activity paused at 4:32, after she texted Kaylee saying, please answer, and didn't resume again until 8 o'clock. When and where did she charge her phone and what was she doing for that 3.5 hours before getting on Instagram from 8:05 to 10 o'clock? Was Instagram just running on her phone while she was doing something else, or was she actually active on IG the whole time? And then what was she doing for that 2 hours? Now for the really strange one. What pics did Bethany take for 1 minute at 8:41? Was she not at home and possibly taking selfies or just random pics, or was she at home? And is that when they discovered things in the house? And somebody stated on a YouTube comment, was she possibly taking pics of herself to maybe show that she didn't have any cuts or bruises? Or the worst, taking pics of the deceased? Or possibly even taking pics of things in the house that were awry? Like the rumors of things possibly being written on the wall. What do you think she was taking pics of? For 1 minute, at 10:03, Dylan was on the website Indeed, which is weird because Indeed is a job website, so why would she be on there unless she was either looking for a job, or looking to hire someone? A really weird thing to be doing if they really were at home. But if they weren't at home, it would make a lot more sense to be doing random things like that. Again, there's so much social media activity going on. Were they messaging a bunch of people or other students, like we have heard? At 10:23, Dylan texts Maddie saying, "Are you up?" And I believe at 11:29 is when she also texts Kaylee saying, "Are you up, and please answer." At 11:50, JM texts Dylan, saying, "Bro," followed by more interactions, which makes me think this was one of the people they were communicating with on social media. I've heard people think JM is Hunter, which could make sense, since Hunter's girlfriend is Emily, and I believe that is who Dylan calls at 11:50. All the social media accounts seem to be Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and then this one, at 11:35, called Yik Yak, which is something I've never heard of before this, but it seems to be meant for communication with close-range contacts. At 11:39, for about a minute, Dylan is texting back and forth with her dad. I've heard that Dylan's mom is said to be a lawyer. If so, that's very, very interesting and suspicious. On the final page, we have a lot more communication with whoever JM is. Then Dylan getting her Insta fix in one more time before Bethany finally calls 911 right before noon, at 11:56. But for real, what took so long? The last thing I wanted you to see is this document about the digital forensic examiner that Brian's team hired to analyze Bethany and Dylan's phone data. Some interesting things he said was that they did make video calls, as well as creation, modification, and deletion of multimedia files, such as images and videos. Normally I put the questions at the end, but I think I pretty much covered them throughout. Let me know if you think of anything else suspicious that I missed. Let's get proper justice for Maddie, Ethan, Kaylee, and Xana.